Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into the most complex and often bewildering aspects of human behavior and societal challenges, bringing you the core insights and surprising facts. Today, we're tackling something that touches every society, something that evokes both fear and, well, a desperate need for understanding. Crime.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It really is a
Yes.
pervasive force, constantly evolving, and for centuries, we've grappled with its origins, trying to understand what truly drives individuals to commit acts that defy our societal norms and often our very sense of humanity.
But what happens when the very foundations of our understanding, especially, within the justice system, are deeply flawed?
Exactly. When the authentic reasons behind criminal acts remain unexamined, leading to profound misjudgments and, crucially, an inability to truly address the problem at its root. Okay, let's unpack this.
Indeed. Our deep dive today focuses on a particularly crucial and often profoundly misunderstood intersection, that of severe mental illness and the criminal justice system. We're talking specifically about a term that's thrown around far too casually in popular culture: psychopaths.
Oh yeah, constantly.
The research we've explored reveals that this term is not only frequently misused and sensationalized, but, even more alarmingly, represents a dangerously unrevealed area within certain judicial systems, especially when we look at the situation in India.
An unrevealed area.
Okay.
Yeah, the core insight emerging from our material is the critical, urgent need for legal frameworks to properly classify, differentiate, and truly understand distinct mental diseases in offenders.
Why? To ensure justice.
To ensure that justice, in its fullest, most informed sense, can truly be served. Yes.
And that's our mission for you, our listener, today. We've gathered extensive research and compelling, sometimes harrowing case studies to peel back the layers and reveal the true nature of psychopathy. We'll explore the unique challenges it poses for society and the legal system, and precisely why its current obscurity or misclassification in some legal frameworks constitutes a significant, even dangerous blind spot. And this isn't just about, slapping a medical label on a criminal.
No, definitely not. It's about understanding the profound and nuanced complexities of human behavior that dramatically impact real lives, real victims, and the very outcomes of legal proceedings. So let's begin this exploration. 1. The broader context: crime, mental illness, and legal blind spots. To begin, let's frame this within the broader context of society itself. The material we've reviewed consistently highlights crime as undeniably one of the greatest evils plaguing our communities.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that.
It's an issue that, despite our persistent and often Herculean efforts to control it, frequently seems to be on the rise. We see its devastating impact daily, whether in the local headlines or global reports. This persistent problem has naturally led to the development of criminology, an expansive interdisciplinary field that draws knowledge from a wide array of disciplines.
Right, it's not just one field looking at it.
Not at all. Think of crime as this incredibly intricate, often baffling puzzle. Criminologists from various fields are constantly examining different pieces to build a complete picture.
Like anthropology.
Yeah, anthropologists delve into the cultural roots of deviant behavior. Economists analyze financial incentives and disincentives.
Psychologists, too, obviously.
Right, psychologists probe individual minds and motivations, and sociologists examine broader societal structures and their influence. All these fields contribute to the ongoing quest to understand the underlying causes of crime.
It's a continuous investigation, really.
Always seeking to identify those crucial, often overlooked pieces that complete our understanding.
And within that multifaceted investigation, researchers have, for a long time, identified a significant and undeniable link between criminality and various forms of emotional or mental illness.
That link seems pretty well established.
It does. The common assumption, then, is that clinical therapy or psychiatric intervention should be a primary solution for crime, especially for those suffering from severe conditions.
Makes sense.
However, here's where the research highlights a critical challenge: what can only be described as a major blind spot within the system.
Okay, what's that?
Many individuals who appear to be sane criminals, meaning they don't exhibit obvious signs of severe mental illness in a way that impacts their fitness for trial, or immediate obvious signs of psychosis.
So they seem normal on the surface.
Exactly. They might actually be suffering from minor yet profoundly impactful types of mental illnesses.
And why aren't these picked up?
Well, often simply because these individuals are never truly examined by a competent forensic psychiatrist. They slip through the cracks, often mislabeled or simply misunderstood.
That's concerning.
What's more concerning globally, and certainly in countries like India, according to the sources, there's been a historical and systemic neglect of mentally ill criminals, particularly those with high degrees of abnormality.
Neglect.
Yes. Very few psychiatrists have actually dedicated their research and efforts to understanding the specific problems these individuals face within the criminal justice system.
Wow. So it's not just an oversight.
It suggests a deep systemic failure where a significant segment of the criminal population might be misdiagnosed or, worse, entirely undiagnosed, leading to inappropriate legal outcomes.
And this brings us to what the research identifies as the core problem. What's termed the vast indistinctness and general categorization of mental diseases within the judicial system.
Indistinctness.
As if once a mental disorder is identified, it's all thrown into one large, undifferentiated bucket.
Ah, I see. Like all mental illness is the same.
Pretty much. All mental disorders, regardless of their specific nature, their severity, or their unique manifestations, are often treated as if they are the same thing.
And this broad brush approach.
The material suggests it leads to serious and, frankly, often unjust misjudgments.
You can see how it would.
Imagine the implications for a moment. Someone suffering from a very specific, nuanced condition might be treated identically to someone with a completely different disorder.
Leading to outcomes that are not only inappropriate, but can also be profoundly damaging both to the individual and, well, to the integrity of justice itself.
Precisely.
And this situation leads to an urgent and unequivocal call from our sources for all stakeholders involved in the criminal justice process.
Who does that include?
It's a broad group. Advocates, judges, social workers, probation officers, the police, medical doctors, basically everyone who interacts with these individuals.
Okay.
They all need to possess not only a deep understanding of the various mental diseases and relevant legal provisions, but also a comprehensive awareness of the support, care, and treatment options that are actually available.
So it's not just about knowing the law.
Not at all. The implication here is profound. A judge, for instance, isn't just there to apply law robotically. They need sensitivity, empathy, and a nuanced knowledge of psychiatric treatment to truly arrive at humane, sensible, and effective decisions.
That makes sense. More than just legal mechanics.
Exactly. The sources even point to numerous contentious judicial decisions that have clearly stemmed from this profound lack of awareness.
Where judges just didn't get the mental health aspect.
Right, where the absence of understanding specific mental conditions has led to judgments that are, at best, questionable, and at worst, deeply unjust and counterproductive to societal safety. This isn't merely about legal procedure, it's about ensuring that the human element of justice is never lost amidst medical complexities. 2. Understanding psychopathy, beyond the misconceptions.
Now let's talk about a term that's thrown around constantly, often sensationalized in movies, true crime documentaries, and everyday conversation. Psycho.
Ugh, yes, that word.
You hear it used to describe anyone who acts violently or unusually, a shorthand for extreme criminality or madness. But our sources are very clear on this point.
What do they say?
There's no term like this in psychology and neurology.
Right, it's purely colloquial.
It's a colloquialism, a creation of popular culture, not a clinical diagnosis. And that's precisely why it's so important for us to properly define what we're actually talking about here and dispel the myths.
Indeed. What the public often colloquially refers to as psycho is clinically known as psychopathy, or more formally, antisocial personality disorder, often abbreviated as APD or ASPD.
Okay, APD or ASPD. Got it.
It is fundamentally a psychological personality disorder, distinct from conditions like schizophrenia or general antisocial behavior.
How is it distinct?
Well, the research delves deeply into its core characteristics, meticulously distinguishing it from general antisocial behavior, which can have many different roots, from environmental factors to trauma.
Yeah.
Psychopathy is different.
Okay, let's break down those characteristics.
Right. First, on the emotional and behavioral front, psychopaths exhibit a profound and chilling lack of conscience and empathy.
A lack of conscience.
Completely. Profoundly lacking, yes. This isn't just a reduced capacity. It's a fundamental, inherent absence of the emotional and moral compass we typically expect. Their emotions are described as hollow emotions.
Hello emotions.
Yeah.
Like empty.
Exactly. They might express what appears to be emotion like sadness or remorse, but it lacks genuine depth or connection. It's often a performative display.
Just an act.
Often, yes. They are masterful at manipulativeness and pathological lying. Deception isn't merely a tactic, it's a core tool in their interactions, almost a default setting.
So lying comes naturally.
Pathologically so. They are intensely egocentric, viewing the world only through the lens of their own desires and needs, and they possess a striking glibness, a superficial charm that can disarm and mislead others.
That's superficial charm. I've heard about that.
It's often just a mask designed to gain access or control. Furthermore, they have a remarkably low frustration tolerance.
Meaning they get angry easily.
Very easily. Which can lead to impulsive, destructive outbursts, especially when their desires are thwarted. Their relationships tend to be episodic, characterized by a pattern of using and discarding people when they are no longer useful. They often lead a parasitic lifestyle, living off others through manipulation or exploitation without any sense of guilt.
Taking advantage of people.
Constantly. They demonstrate a persistent violation of social norms, a disregard for rules and expectations, and a constant need for stimulation.
Like thrill-seeking.
An insatiable craving for novelty and excitement, yes, which often manifests in what our sources call criminal versatility, engaging in a wide range of illicit activities, not limited to one type of crime.
Okay. That covers the emotional and behavioral side. What about physically?
Beyond these behavioral patterns, the research also highlights distinct physiological and temperamental aspects. Psychopaths often exhibit a notable lack of fear and inhibition.
Lack of fear.
They show a reduced physical response to negative stimuli. So the normal physiological reactions to stress or danger, like a racing heart or sweaty palms, that most people experience are significantly dulled or even absent in them.
That's fascinating. So threats don't work.
It translates to an indifference to the threat of pain and punishment. Conventional deterrents often have little to no effect because they don't experience the same internal alarm signals. Wow. This combination of traits reinforces their stimulus-seeking behavior, constantly chasing that next rush, that next high, regardless of the consequences to themselves or others. The very things that deter most people just don't register in the same way.
Fascinating and, frankly, quite chilling. It really paints a stark picture of a fundamentally different way of experiencing the world.
It does.
A way that makes true connection and understanding incredibly difficult for neurotypical individuals.
Wow.
And speaking of specific diagnostic approaches, the research highlights the significant contributions of psychologist Robert Hare and his associates.
Ah, yes, Hare. Very influential.
They really advanced the understanding and assessment of psychopathy, particularly through the development of the Psychopathy checklist, or PCL.
PCL, right.
This isn't just a casual questionnaire, is it?
Yeah. No. It's a structured clinical tool used by trained professionals. It consists of 22 items, and clinicians weight each item from 0 to 2, depending on the severity and presence of certain behaviors and traits.
0 to 2. Okay.
These items are grouped around two main factors. One, focusing on the interpersonal and affective features like narcissism and lack of empathy.
The internal stuff.
Right. And the other on the more impulsive, antisocial behavior, the outward actions.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it's through rigorous tools like the PCL that clinicians can objectively assess and score an individual's level of psychopathy.
Exactly. Moving beyond mere anecdote or media hype to a more scientific, standardized understanding.
So what does research using these tools tell us about when psychopathy starts?
And the research findings using such tools are quite telling regarding the emergence and persistence of psychopathy. The material indicates that psychopathy often appears early in life.
In childhood.
Yes, with clear indicators manifesting in childhood, and it tends to persist well into middle age, often lessening only in later life.
What kind of childhood indicators are we talking about?
Things like drug abuse at a young age, persistent theft, aggression often disproportionate to the situation, truancy, general problem behavior in school and at home, persistent and pathological lying, and poor educational achievement.
But not necessarily because they aren't smart.
Not necessarily linked to cognitive ability, no. More to a lack of motivation or disregard for rules. These aren't just typical childhood missteps. When they form a consistent pattern, they can indeed foreshadow later difficulties.
But there are caveats here, right? It's not set in stone.
That's absolutely crucial caveats. The research emphasizes this isn't a deterministic path. Not all children who exhibit some of these behaviors necessarily go on to commit adult crimes or develop full-blown psychopathy.
Okay, that's important.
Similarly, and this is an important distinction, not all individuals diagnosed with psychopathy are criminals in the legal sense.
Some function in society.
Some manage to navigate society without breaking laws, often using their manipulative skills in other, less overtly criminal ways, in business, politics.
Right. And can it change?
Importantly, our sources suggest that some of these behaviors can change with age, hinting that some form of intervention, especially early on, may help to redirect these problematic behaviors or mitigate their most destructive expressions.
So there's maybe a glimmer of hope for intervention.
A glimmer, yes. It emphasizes that the presence of these traits doesn't automatically seal a person's fate to a life of crime or complete social dysfunction.
That distinction is incredibly important. But then there's this particularly intriguing and arguably most dangerous aspect our sources reveal. Psychopaths are often described as being very intelligent,
Cunning.
exceptionally cunning, and surprisingly capable of holding very elite positions in society.
Yes, that's a key finding.
Think about that for a moment. This isn't always the unkempt, obvious villain from a horror movie.
No, far from it sometimes.
Their intelligence, combined with their profound lack of empathy, their glib charm, and their masterful manipulation, means they can blend in seamlessly, even thrive in environments that reward cunning, control, and a ruthless pursuit of power.
The implication is profound.
It makes them incredibly difficult to understand and recognize. Unless they are actively harming others in a visible, undeniable way, they are often considered as nice persons by those around them.
By colleagues, friends, even family?
Because they are so skilled at presenting a facade of normalcy and even benevolence, this makes them a hidden danger, operating undetected within the very fabric of society, often causing immense damage behind the scenes.
And their motivation, or rather the striking lack of traditional motivation, that further complicates things, doesn't it? Especially for the law.
How so?
Well, the legal system often seeks to clear mens rea, a guilty mind, or specific criminal intent. But the research explains that a psychopath's intention is often to harm without any reason that a neurotypical person would understand.
No reason.
It's driven by what's described as a pure and simple sadistic feeling. They don't typically commit crimes for traditional gain, revenge, or even passion in the conventional sense.
So what is the motive then?
Often, they simply enjoy watching others in pain. This pleasure is often their primary motive.
Enjoyment of suffering.
Yes, deceitfulness and fraudulence are not just tools they employ. The material suggests they are their very identity. They possess an uncanny ability to imitate the finest thing and harm others by making that best part as a weapon.
Wow. Using good things for harm.
They exploit trust, vulnerabilities, turning positive attributes or relationships into instruments of harm. This fundamental characteristic, the intention to harm for its own sake, driven by a perverse pleasure or internal compulsion, profoundly challenges the standard legal concept of mens rea.
Because what does guilty mind even mean then?
Exactly. When the reason for the crime is rooted in a pathological internal state rather than a rational, understandable motive like greed or anger, how does the law account for that? It forces us to question if mens rea can even apply in the traditional sense. 3. The Indian judicial system. Acknowledging an unrevealed area.
Now, let's turn our attention to a critical concern raised by the sources we've examined, focusing specifically on the Indian judicial system. This is really central to our deep dive today.
This is crucial.
Despite numerous documented cases of serial killers, profound mental illness, incest, and other sexually violent crimes being reported in India, the research makes a stark and unsettling observation. No case has been reported as committed by psychopaths.
None at all, officially.
Officially, according to these sources. Let that sink in for a moment. This stands in sharp contrast to countries like the UK and the US, where
they have specific laws.
Right, where separate statutes have been made for the psychopaths, providing distinct legal frameworks for addressing this specific mental ailment.
That disparity is huge. It suggests a significant, arguably dangerous gap in legal, public, and even medical understanding within the Indian system.
This is indeed the very crux of the issue, what the material calls the unrevealed area.
And the Nathori case is a prime example.
Yes, to illustrate this judicial blind spot, the research points directly to the infamous Nathori case involving Surinder Kohli, which shook India to its core in the mid-2000s.
I remember that case. Horrific.
The details are chilling and necessary to understand the legal ramifications. In December 2006, residents found human remains in a drain behind a house in Noida.
Right.
This led to the gruesome discovery of decomposed remains of numerous children, with horrifying suspicions of cannibalism.
And there was initial police negligence.
Rampant, apparently. Locals alleged their repeated complaints about missing children were tragically ignored. It took public outcry and eventually the involvement of the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation, to fully uncover the horror.
Okay, so what about Coley's profile in this context?
What's absolutely critical for our discussion today is Coley's profile as revealed by the sources. The material states unequivocally that Coley initially had clear traits of psychopathy
Rare traits.
and was actually identified as psychopath during early investigations, likely by experts involved.
Okay, so it was recognized early on.
It seems so. However, and this is the vital part, this important factor became a vague impression as the case progressed.
It just faded away.
Apparently. Ultimately leading to Coley being awarded capital punishment without this crucial aspect truly shaping the judicial outcome.
Even though they suspected psychopathy.
It appears that way, and his post-arrest confession further highlights this. Coley chillingly stated, "I still have an urge to kill."
An urge to kill even after being caught.
Our source identifies this as a typical sign of psychopathy, this unyielding internal drive, this lack of satiation. Yet, it appears this fundamental aspect of his mental state was not adequately integrated into the legal proceedings that led to his sentencing.
So it was reduced to just a criminal act, not a symptom of a disorder?
Seems like it. A complex pathology treated as simple criminality.
That's a profound oversight, isn't it?
It is. And it speaks directly to what the sources call the legal lacuna in India, the absence of a specific defined framework.
A legal gap.
There is literally no separate law to treat psychopath offenders.
So what happens then? How do police investigate?
Well, this means that when the police investigate such gruesome crimes, their investigation often defaults to only 3 predetermined options for categorizing the offender. Either the person is deemed insane or of unsound mind under existing broad statutes, or they're simply categorized as a monster or perhaps schizophrenic.
Just those few boxes.
That seems to be the implication. This limited understanding, this lack of specific knowledge about psychopathy as a distinct entity, leads to what the research describes as inhuman investigations.
Inhuman? Why?
Because the system lacks the precise tools or the conceptual framework to understand the authentic underlying reason behind these horrific offenses. The investigative process itself becomes inadequate and, in many ways, insensitive to the true nature of the perpetrator's condition.
Potentially leading to misdirected justice.
Exactly.
And the consequences of this profound lack of understanding are severe and far-reaching. Offenders who might be psychopaths are either convicted, often facing life imprisonment or even the death penalty, or they are acquitted solely on the grounds of being broadly insane.
And both can be wrong.
The sources argue that both of these outcomes can be erroneous ways of judgment when psychopathy is the actual underlying condition.
Right. And this comes back to mens rea, the guilty mind.
Precisely. It resurfaces with critical importance here. Although psychopaths clearly know what they are doing, they are aware of their actions and their immediate consequences.
They understand the act itself.
Yes, but they often do not know the reason behind that in a way that aligns with typical criminal intent. This means that the traditional concept of mens rea, in the sense of a guilty mind or a feeling of remorse for the act, is completely absent in their behavior.
Completely absent.
They never conceal their crimes, not because they are inept, but often because they simply don't see anything inherently wrong with what they've done. They show no remorse for their actions.
No guilt, no regret.
None. No repentance on their faces when they are apprehended or confronted. In fact, they openly accept their criminal acts without any repentance or sentiment. They candidly admit their crimes and often express a desire to commit them again.
Driven by that internal urge you mentioned.
Exactly. Driven by a strong internal urge stemming from their disease. This chilling absence of remorse or repentance is often misinterpreted by the judicial system as extreme callousness.
Or just being a hardened criminal.
Right, or an overt defiance of the law, leading to harsher punishments based on a misunderstanding of their internal state.
So the lack of remorse works against them legally.
Hugely. This is why the research argues so strongly for a sympathetic view, not as an excuse for their heinous actions, but as an acknowledgement of the profound influence of the disease on their behavior.
Understanding the why.
Exactly. The legal system's ignorance of this fundamental fact about psychopathy, in stark contrast to their knowledge of other mental illnesses, is presented as a critical failing that needs urgent rectification. It's about understanding the why to deliver more appropriate, though still firm, justice.
A critical point, isn't it? This misinterpretation, this societal and judicial mislabeling is deeply ingrained. In the Nathori case, Coley was widely considered a monster and an animal.
Common labels in such cases.
And often described in the media as a psycho killer. This reflects a broader trend to attach the word psycho to any abnormal person or any gruesome act without any proper knowledge or understanding of the actual clinical disease.
It's a catch-all term, but inaccurate.
Every antisocial personality disorder, whether it's genuine psychopathy or something else entirely, ends up being treated in the same manner, which, as we're seeing, is wholly inadequate for a disorder as distinct and dangerous as psychopathy.
It's a convenient label, but deeply unhelpful.
And is there concrete evidence of this lack of recognition within the system?
Yes, the evidence for this issue within the Indian system is stark, according to the research. Interviews conducted with doctors in mental hospitals and jails reveal a disturbing fact. In the 5 years preceding the research, there were no registered cases of psychopathy.
0 in 5 years.
0 registered cases. This is despite the acknowledged presence of serial killers and mental patients often being kept in the same wards, sometimes alongside those labeled as hardcore criminals.
So what does that mean? Are there no psychopaths committing crimes?
Well, this observation raises an incredibly important and unsettling question. Is it truly possible that psychopaths simply didn't commit any crimes in India during that period? Or, more plausibly, does it suggest that the Indian legal system fundamentally lacks proper awareness of the disease?
The second seems more likely.
The research implies the latter. Are these individuals being misinterpreted as mere ogres and hardcore criminals, leading to overly harsh and entirely inappropriate punishments that fail to address the underlying condition or prevent future harm in a therapeutically informed way? It points to a systemic failure in identification and classification.
So even with existing legal provisions in India, they fall short. What laws do exist for mental illness?
Our sources mention sections like IPC Sec. 84, which deals with unsoundness of mind, a concept drawn from England's McNaughton rules.
Right, the not knowing right from wrong standard.
Exactly. If the accused was laboring under such a defect of reason, from disease of the mind, as not to know the nature and quality of the act or that it was wrong, there are also provisions in the Hindu Marriage Act, the Evidence Act, and Chapter 65 of the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973, which outline procedures for the trial of insane persons.
But these aren't specific to psychopathy.
No. And the research critically evaluates these existing laws as outdated and inadequate. They simply do not provide protection to behavior out of abnormality of mind or partial delusion, irresistible impulse, or compulsive behavior of a psychopath.
So the specific traits, the impulse, the compulsion, aren't covered.
Precisely. The specific manifestations of psychopathy, those core traits we discussed, like the irresistible urge to harm or the total absence of remorse, aren't sufficiently covered or even acknowledged by the current legal framework.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
A very specific, complex, pathological square peg into a very broad and generalized round hole.
Yes, and this leads to problems during the legal process itself.
Significant procedural challenges. It's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to identify a mentally ill offender, especially a psychopath, at the time of arrest based on superficial observations.
They don't look crazy.
Often not. They often appear lucid, calm, and rational. While fitness for trial is assessed, the problem with psychopaths is that they seem to be fit for trial.
They can understand the proceedings.
Yes, they can understand the charges against them and assist counsel, often appearing to grasp the legal process fully. Moreover, they often admit their crimes with no remorse.
We talked about that lack of remorse misleading things.
Exactly. Readily confessing without trying to conceal their actions or express regret. This attitude, this open acceptance of their horrifying deeds can severely mislead the case.
How so?
It causes them to be perceived as exceptionally gruesome, cold-blooded offenders with an utter lack of repentance for their acts, leading to the harshest possible sentencing without consideration for the underlying pathology.
So what's needed then?
This highlights the urgent necessity for mandatory psychoanalysis for such offenders, not just a general psychiatric evaluation for fitness to stand trial. The system needs to go deeper.
Like in the UK and US.
This is precisely where other legal systems, like those in the UK and USA, have made significant strides. The research explicitly states that these countries have specific laws, widespread recognition, and a far greater awareness for psychopaths, which fundamentally influences their punishment and, crucially, their treatment.
So they approach it differently because they recognize it differently.
Yes. They understand that a different legal and therapeutic approach is needed when dealing with a genuine personality disorder of this magnitude, one that acknowledges the disease's influence while still ensuring public safety. 4. A pattern of unidentified psychopathy. notorious Indian cases.
This brings us to a particularly fascinating and unsettling observation from the research. We've just discussed how officially no case has been reported as committed by psychopaths in India.
Right, the official record is blank.
Yet, if we take a closer look at many of these notorious cases that have gripped the nation, the research suggests that many of them indicate psychopathic tendencies.
The signs are there, even if the label isn't.
Exactly. It's as if the pattern is there, the behaviors are screaming the diagnosis, but the label, the understanding, simply isn't applied by the judicial system. If we connect this to the bigger picture,
It suggests a widespread misinterpretation.
of truly horrific acts, often leading to a focus solely on the crime rather than the complex individual behind it. What does this look like in practice? Can you give some examples?
Absolutely. The research meticulously walks us through a series of infamous Indian cases, and even a few international ones, pointing out behaviors that align strikingly with the psychopathic traits we've already discussed, even if the official diagnoses or judicial records never explicitly use the term psychopath.
Okay, let's hear some.
Well, we've already touched on Surrender Kohli in the Natari case.
Right. Identified early on, but it faded.
Exactly. Identified as having clear traits, his chilling admission, "I still have an urge to kill," being a classic sign. Yet this crucial factor seemingly became a vague impression in the legal process. His crimes, the mutilation, possible cannibalism, speak to extreme sadism and lack of empathy.
And the system called him a monster.
Defaulting to that label rather than a medically informed classification that might have led to a different, albeit still punitive, approach.
Okay, who else?
Then consider Raman Raghav, active in Mumbai in the mid-1960s.
The Stoneman. No, that was later. Raman Raghav.
Right, not the Stoneman. Raghav terrorized Mumbai, committing numerous brutal murders, often of slum dwellers. After his arrest, he was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Okay, so they did diagnose a mental illness.
They did, and his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment because he was found to be incurably mentally ill. But here's the thing.
What?
The research implies it was likely a misdiagnosis. Schizophrenia, typically involving delusions and a break from reality, is distinct from psychopathy's lack of empathy and clear, though perverse, grasp of reality.
So Raghav's traits fit psychopathy better.
His history of calculated, repetitive violence, his indifference, his lack of remorse align more strongly with psychopathy. The system identified an illness, but arguably the wrong one, leading to a legal outcome based on partial understanding.
Interesting. Another one.
Charles Sobraj, the bikini killer.
Ah, very famous or infamous.
Described as one of the most high-profile criminals from India, known for killing 12 people by strangulation and poisoning across Asia, what stands out in his profile, according to the research?
The charm, the manipulation.
Exactly. His constant quest for adventure and high society lifestyle, his exceptional charm, masterful manipulation, classic psychopathic traits, glibness, parasitic lifestyle, need for stimulation, ability to operate undetected.
He evaded capture for years using those traits.
Precisely, using them as weapons. His crimes weren't just about murder, but about control. The thrill of the chase very much aligned with psychopathic motivations.
Okay, these are chilling. Any others?
Perhaps one of the most chilling examples cited is Dandapaya Krishna.
The gang leader.
Yes, leader of the Dandapaya gang, responsible for 42 or more killings between 1995 and 1999, often using crowbars. His quote, given without a hint of remorse, is stark.
What did he say?
He said, "I like to hear the last sounds of life draining away. It is exciting to hear the gurgling sound that emerges from the throat after I slit it."
Wow. Just cold.
This statement perfectly encapsulates the sadistic pleasure, the instrumental use of violence, the complete, utter lack of empathy and remorse characteristic of psychopathy. A clear, self-admitted enjoyment of causing pain.
A motivation that's hard to comprehend.
Exactly. It defies traditional understanding and points directly to the pathology. Yet his case, like so many others, was likely processed without the explicit judicial recognition of psychopathy as the core driver.
These cases, despite their horrifying details and diverse methods, they share striking common threads when viewed through the lens of psychopathy, don't they?
They really do.
What stands out time and again is the apparent lack of remorse, the absence of a discernible guilty mind in the traditional sense, and the often incomprehensible nature of their motivation or lack thereof.
It's not about revenge or passion in the usual way.
No, it seems like a cold, calculated, or simply pathological drive inherent to the disease. The consistency of these behaviors across multiple high-profile cases, despite the absence of an official psychopathy diagnosis, It truly reinforces this idea of an unrevealed area.
And this reiterates the core judicial confusion the research highlights. There is not a single case which specifies the disease psychopathy in judgment within the Indian system, at least in the period examined.
No official recognition.
Yet, as we've just seen in every one of the above discussed cases, the accused persons have clear traits of psychopathy. This discrepancy is precisely the unrevealed area the research is calling attention to.
The behavior is there, but the legal system isn't seeing it or naming it.
Exactly. Leading to a profound gap in understanding and consequently inappropriate legal and therapeutic responses that could truly address the problem and protect society in the long term. 5. Distinguishing psychopathy from other crimes.
Given all these examples and the pervasive misunderstanding, it's clear that there's a lot of confusion surrounding psychopathy.
A huge amount, yes.
The research directly addresses this, stating that psychopathy is mostly confused with sociopathy, serial killing, incest, rape, and other sexually violent crime.
People tend to lump them all together.
Right, using terms like psycho killer indiscriminately. But that, the research argues, is a critical mistake that hinders effective legal and societal responses. How do we draw these crucial distinctions?
Indeed, and the research calls for clear, fundamental distinctions. The mens rea, the criminal intent, is key.
How's it different?
It's different and distinct. For psychopaths, as we've emphasized, the motive is totally absent in the conventional sense because the crime is fundamentally due to their disease.
The disease is the reason.
It's an internal compulsion, a manifestation of their core pathology, the enjoyment of harm, the need for stimulation, the complete disregard for others. The crime is almost a symptom rather than a motivated act of free will as legally understood.
Okay, so that's distinct from, say, serial killing.
Well, here's the nuance. Psychopaths may be serial killers, and many notorious ones exhibit psychopathic traits.
But not all serial killers are psychopaths.
Exactly. Every serial killer is not a psychopath. The patterns of killing can sometimes be so similar that even experts get confused, which underscores the complexity.
So what might motivate a non-psychopathic serial killer?
They might be driven by specific fantasies, obsessions, a desire for notoriety, or a need for power that isn't rooted in the core psychopathic lack of empathy.
Like a specific grudge or delusion.
Right. Whereas a psychopathic killer might simply kill opportunistically for the sheer thrill or sadistic pleasure. The motivation is the key differentiator.
Okay. And what about distinguishing it from crimes like rape or incest?
Similarly, crimes like incest, rape, child molestation, and sodomy can occur due to a wide variety of complex reasons.
And such as?
These could include deep-seated obsessions, a desire for revenge, a perverse sense of pleasure, or simply overwhelming lust. These acts are only occasionally due to psychopathy.
So psychopathy could be a cause, but often isn't.
Exactly. The crucial distinction the research makes is that the cause of crime in these other cases is typically not due to a disease in the same fundamental, overarching way it is for psychopathy.
It's more about other motivations, however twisted.
Right. While some offenders in these categories might have underlying psychological issues, it's not the inherent driving force of a personality disorder in the same way that psychopathy is. For psychopaths, the disease is the fundamental cause.
That differentiation seems absolutely vital for the justice system.
It is vital for both accurate legal judgment and appropriate therapeutic intervention.
And this is precisely why there's a clear demarcation in legal systems like those in the UK and the US, right?
Yes, they've established categories and laws that recognize these differences,
Leading to different consequences.
leading to appropriate punishments and treatments based on the disease itself, not just the crime committed in isolation. This is what the research advocates for in India. A move towards a more nuanced, medically informed legal approach. Exactly. This highlights an essential and urgent requirement for the Indian criminal justice system. There's a profound need to change its entire concept.
Its whole approach.
Its approach to dealing with and its method for judging psychopaths and all other mentally ill offenders. They must be handled according to their disease and not by the crime committed by them.
That sounds controversial, though. Does it mean excusing the crime?
Not at all. This is not about letting anyone off the hook or excusing their actions. It's about understanding the root cause to ensure justice is proportionate, effective, and truly addresses the underlying issues of mental health in the context of criminal behavior.
So it allows for a more targeted response.
Yes, focusing not just on punishment, but on preventing future harm by managing the condition, even if, as is often the case with psychopathy, it cannot be cured. Outro.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that the term psycho, so commonly used today for anyone perceived as mentally ill, is not only inaccurate,
Massively inaccurate.
as the research confirms, there's no term like this in psychology and neurology, but also reflects a significant confusion and lack of knowledge regarding psychopathy as a distinct, dangerous, and often profoundly misunderstood mental illness. The difference, as we've explored, can be a thin but crucial line, especially when distinguishing it from other types of heinous crimes like serial killing, incest, or child abuse.
And the problem isn't just semantic. It's not just about words.
No, it have real, tangible consequences for how justice is administered and how society perceives individuals capable of such profound harm.
This ambiguity, the research argues, absolutely has to be resolved by the judiciary and legislature.
What do they recommend?
They advocate for making and passing special laws for this kind of mental illness. The goal isn't just about legal clarity, it's about educating the public and the government alike about this dangerous disease.
Because of that unrevealed area.
Exactly. That unrevealed area of psychopathy in the Indian judicial system, as seen in cases like Surinder Kohli's, means that the authentic reason for horrific crimes is often overlooked,
Leading to judgments that miss the point.
that miss the fundamental nature of the offender's condition. This perpetuates a cycle of misunderstanding, potentially leading to inappropriate sentences and an inability to truly manage or prevent such pathology in the future.
So what does this all mean for us, our understanding of justice and our approach to crime? It leaves us with some really tough questions, doesn't it?
It really does.
If, as our sources suggest, psychopathy is a genuine disease that compels heinous acts without a traditional guilty mind or remorse, how should society balance the critical need for justice and accountability for victims with the imperative for humane, informed treatment for the offenders?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The balance.
And what responsibility do we have, as individuals and as a society, to delve deeper beyond the sensational headlines and the simplistic labels to truly understand the complex why behind such profound and disturbing human behavior?
That really makes you think.